Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay in the back? Thumbs up in the back, please. Yes? Perfect. Well, good morning. It's great to be here with you. My name is Alonso Bustamante. I am here from a company called Cloudflare. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with Cloudflare, we are a cloud network and cloud infrastructure company. Let me take you back 5 years to my origins in the world of artificial intelligence. We all hear about the world of artificial intelligence today, but I want to take you to my origins. I woke up to an email 5 years ago from our founder and from our chief technology officer, and it included all sorts of terminology that I was unfamiliar with. GPUs, FPGAs, machine learning, artificial intelligence, things that are commonplace in the news these days. The next couple of months of my life after that email had me trying to familiarize myself with the world of hardware for artificial intelligence, trying to familiarize myself with what customers could use to accelerate their machine learning needs on cloud networks like Cloudflare. So we fast forward to today, and artificial intelligence is something that we've all heard about, that you're going to hear about it all day. I imagine that you're going to hear the terminology AI over 150 times today. So let me do a quick show of hands. Everybody will recognize this logo. Who here has used ChatGPT for their personal or daily lives in the last year? Show of hands. Okay, for the recording, I'm going to say that over 66% of the theater raised their hands. Now, let me follow up with a different question, which is, how many of you have used ChatGPT or other forms of artificial intelligence in your workplace for a professional context? Roughly the same number of hands, so that's an incredible change. An incredible change from probably a year ago, when most of us, or at least a lot of us, started becoming familiar with generative AI, with machine learning, with large language models. And we really are at the beginning of an era. I believe that, just like the previous speaker from Google spoke about, I genuinely believe that we are at the beginning of the next great paradigm shift in the technology space. If we go back 20 years, it was cloud. That was the buzzword that you would hear in these types of conferences. Going forward, you would hear a little bit about mobile, or a lot about mobile. Then you would hear about the impact of social. And now, whether you're here in Georgia, whether you're in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, in California, in London, or in Johannesburg, AI, 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 AI. And this reminds me a little bit of 2007, at the advent of the mobile phone era. For those of you who might not remember, I'll give you a very quick history lesson. Steve Jobs introduces the iPhone in 2007, but when he introduces the iPhone on stage in 2007, he introduced it, as you can see on the screen, as three things. 1, a digital music player. 2, a mobile phone. And 3, an internet browsing device. If we think about how we use our mobile phones today, there's one core component missing from that image. It's Uber, it's TikTok, it's any sort of application, it's Instagram, it's everything that we use in our day-to-day lives. What's missing from this image? Third-party applications, an application ecosystem, a developer ecosystem. So when we talk about artificial intelligence today, I told you about 5 years ago learning a little bit about the underpinnings of artificial intelligence, the hardware space. We have the infrastructure space. Ready. But now it's the advent of the application era. It's the advent of developers really taking these tools into their hands, taking these new models into their hands, and coming up with fantastic ideas of what they're going to be doing. It's a very sensitive clicker. So let me level set with a couple of terms before we move into some of the practical recommendations. AI, machine learning, there's all sorts of flavors of this world. Most of us have been using the outputs of machine learning for many years. I would imagine that many of you follow Netflix's queue for recommending what you should watch next. I won't call it a simple, but that is a machine learning algorithm that takes into account what you're watching, what you're viewing, what you like, what you don't like, and then recommends the next thing. By the way, for me, doesn't work that well. I always find those recommendations a little bit lacking, but there's always improvements to be made. So the early eras of artificial intelligence was really about machine learning. It was about applications and functionalities that allowed you to classify, to predict, to group data, to make recommendations. And now, as we're all learning and have learned over the last year, as we have these consumer applications, it is about natural language processing, it is about large language models, it is about engaging in conversation context and providing richer and richer functionality and richer context for anything that you're looking to solve. Now, I want to spend 2 minutes on terminology, and an important terminology that we should all be familiar with. In the era of generative AI and in the era of large language models, we should be familiar with the words training, and we should be familiar with the word inference. Training, in the simplest terms, think about when most of you went to school, university, you were trained. You were trained to become an engineer, you were trained to become a developer, you were trained to become a UX designer, a doctor, et cetera, et cetera. There was a lot of information thrown at you. You learned it, and later in life you will make decisions with that information. The same is true for large language models. You've got to train them. You've got to throw information at them so they learn how to give you the correct answers. The inference bit is when those answers need to happen. It's when, once you've been trained, you get asked, for example, is this an image of a cat or is this an image of a dog? And the model answers, it's an image of a dog. That is a trained model. If we think about training and what's needed for training, it needs tremendous computing needs. So all over the world, there are these server farms. You've seen the images of Google data centers, Amazon Web Service data centers, Microsoft data centers, and there's this ginormous server farms that have tremendous compute needs. That's usually where training has happened, where these GPUs are loaded around the world. This can happen far away from the user. When you're training, just like when you're going to university, you don't need to do it close to home. Parents might be upset, but that's okay. You can go study somewhere else around the world, and you will be trained. And there's massive data needs. However, the inference bit requires lower compute needs. It requires much lower compute needs, and it also needs to happen close to the user. You were listening to the previous keynote speaker. He talked a little bit about Tesla's self-driving capabilities. There are artificial intelligence capabilities loaded onto Tesla cars. That is because when the autopilot is on, for example, to stop at a red light or not stop at a red light needs to happen very, very close to where the car is and where the driver is. So this time to response is critical when we're talking about inference in terms of artificial intelligence. Responses are important. So this leads to an important question, which is where are artificial intelligence models going to live in the future? Where do we believe that they're going to live, and where are responses going to be coming from if you think about the infrastructure of AI? The obvious answer would be in the little devices that we have in our pockets, mobile phones, right? Mobile phones is the natural evolution of where AI models would live. The early versions of it, many of you would have used. Siri, there's obviously some model that is running inside the phone. But large language models tend to be compute intensive, energy intensive. They tend to require a lot of power. So some models will be small enough to run in the mobile phone. But we also believe that, and I believe that, a lot of it will be running around the world in distributed edge networks. So I will only spend a second talking about the company I'm here, which is Cloudflare. And we have a giant edge network, which means that every single one of these dots that you see on the map has servers around the world, and it's essentially one giant supercomputer that is giving responses to websites, giving responses to internet-facing applications, giving responses to any type of internet-facing connected property. So we've loaded up this super network with GPUs, the brain power that is running artificial intelligence around the world, the hardware that is running artificial intelligence around the world, because we're convinced that beyond the mobile phone, a lot of this inference that I was talking about is going to happen very close to where end users are. And if you remember the map from a slide ago, every single one of those dots on the map, 300 dots on the map, very close to where the global population lives. So we do believe that the future of AI, and AI inference in particular, has those two components: proximity to the user in the phone, but also proximity to the user in terms of localized data centers that will allow inference for all of you. For all of you that are building applications, for all of you that are working in startups, that are building design, that are doing all these things that are important. So what do you need to think about We have founders here, we've designers here, we've got CEOs here, we've got entrepreneurs here, we've got people who are actually using artificial intelligence or beginning to use artificial intelligence for commercial purposes and for professional purposes, which is why I did the little exercise of show of hands. 2/3 of you are using AI for personal purposes or professional purposes. So I want to talk about 4 things that are important that you should consider in terms of using AI for yourself, using AI for your own businesses and in your own workflows. First, for those of you who are building AI, for those of you who are using models, third-party models, and considering how to embed your applications with additional functionality that can give your customers a much more efficient experience, I encourage you to think about a couple of things. One is building on AI is getting cheaper, but it is still incredibly expensive. Using GPUs is something that can be incredibly expensive for developers. So I do encourage you to think, for any of you who are building applications, think about where you're building this. Think about cost arbitrage. Think about the opportunity to migrate from using compute power on AWS or GCP or Microsoft Azure or anywhere where you can find the cheapest GPUs, and that's incredibly important. I would encourage you, as you can imagine, to get close to the user. Response time and time to action is critical. So anything that can increase your performance and the performance of your applications, the applications that some of you might be building, is also very, very relevant. The speaker before me talked a little bit about open-sourced and closed-sourced models. That's also an important decision for any of you who are developing here. If you were developing, just like when you were developing software, developing AI models and training AI models, you need to make a decision of what models you're going to be using. Am I going to be using OpenAI? Am I going to be using Meta's Llama? Am I going to be using Hugging Face's model or many others? And you've got an important decision to make in terms of what's important to you and what's important to your users in terms of using open source versus closed source and the flexibility that that might allow you over time. And incredibly important in an internet that is becoming increasingly complex and increasingly local, the data privacy aspect of building AI-powered applications is incredibly important. Regulations around the world are going up that are saying data can only live here, can only live there, it can only be within the parameters of a certain region, of a certain country. So when your users are inputting tremendous amounts of data and sensitive data into models that you might be building, well, you need to ask yourselves, where am I going to run these models that allows me to meet the local regulations that make my business compliant and my business relevant? In terms of connecting, I spend a lot of time in these types of conferences talking to developers who are building AI applications. And the common story that I hear is, oh yes, I am experimenting with X, I'm experimenting with Y, I'm building a model here, I'm trying this new technology. And then I talk to CEOs, and CEOs tell me, I have no idea what my developers are doing in terms of where they're going to, where they're spending, how much they're spending, how many models they're connecting to, what data is going out there. And CEOs and founders are always encouraging experimenting, but they're also a little bit concerned. So think about tools that can allow you the visibility into where your developers might be building. Tools that can allow you, and just like you might use Datadog or Splunk for visibility into other types of services, tools that can allow you visibility into where your developers are spending time and where they're sending your data. Protection is also an incredibly important conversation. Security is becoming more and more relevant, especially in a world where there's adversaries that are better trained and using the same tools that we're using every day in this type of conversation. One of the most important things for any of you who are running teams or having employees that are connecting to these types of tools, to ChatGPT or many others, is what type of data is going out there into those tools. The nightmare scenario is you don't want customer data going out there, credit cards going out there, personal information going out there, and not necessarily because of malicious intent, but perhaps because some eager professional wanted to throw in credit card data there for analysis about spending patterns that might be relevant for customers. This is not malicious exfiltration of data, but you also need to think about tools that can allow you to at least partially monitor or limit some of the data that your company is putting out there into these models, because Some of these models are not necessarily limited to your company or your use, and they leverage this data to make the results for everybody better. So that's an important consideration that you need to think about. How do I protect the data of my customers? How do I protect my employees? And maybe the last thing I'll talk about is safe use. All of us are using AI. All of our employees are using AI. My personal belief is this is a wave that cannot be stopped. So you do need to ask yourselves, what is the type of conversation that I want to have with my teams in terms of how we can best use these tools to become more efficient, to become more productive, to have better brainstorming, better ideas, and ultimately serve our customers and our users better. I'll tell you some of the ways that we're using third-party tools internally to make our business more efficient, and maybe it can spur some ideas for you. Our business intelligence team, for example, is using different sorts of third-party tools to better predict cash flow. So for any of you who might be in finance, or CEOs here who are thinking about finance, better prediction of cash flow. For any of you who might be in sales functions, we also use customer score and predictability scores to see who is more propense to spending with us. So for anybody who is in a sales function, better predictability of who your customers might be and who might spend, pretty relevant. We're also using this for customer support. All of us deal with customers in different ways and sizes. Automating customer support and having these fantastic chatbots that can perhaps save human escalation for really important matters is another way that we're using AI internally, and so can you. Sales operations. One of the biggest things where we have inefficiency is where's the data that I need to show the customers? Where's the one-pager? Where is the competitive intelligence? Where's the presentation that we've already done 2 years ago for this relevant industry that we can use again? We started automating all that so that actually, just like our customers can go to a customer support bot and get automated responses with our company public data, we're doing the same internally so that we can make our teams more efficient as they look for information. And in a small company, you can just ask your neighbor and sit in the desk next to you or chat them, et cetera. But in larger companies, as your companies grow and scale, which I hope that all of them will, this becomes an increasingly relevant problem. Recruiting. We also use these tools for recruiting. We use, this year I think we were getting close to 1 million CVs of people knocking on our door trying to join the company. That's an impossible scale, right? And inevitably, humans miss things, but machines can help us and can help augment us. So we're using programs where we're recommended profiles that we might have missed, or improving our ability to scan resumes and scan applicants so that we can better understand who our applicant pool and who might actually be a good candidate to match some of the applications that we've put out there. And finally, our IT team is using this very, very much to help our own users answer questions that might be obvious. So these are just some ways that we're using applications internally that you could consider. One of the questions that I get most often when I'm speaking with people about artificial intelligence is like, well, that's fantastic. You're a technology company. You're pretty advanced. I imagine that you've got a very robust AI strategy, but what about me? What are some of the things that I should be doing? Well, these are some examples of some of the things that we're doing. Finally, the last thing I want to mention is, for all of you, have an open conversation with your teams about what right and what is wrong for the parameters of your business. Previous conversation was talking about ethics. Previous conversation was talking about privacy. I really encourage you to have open conversations with your team as to what is allowable, what is permissible, and what is not. We've got our own guidelines, and my company's guidelines might not be the same as yours, or yours. But as long as you're having those conversations with your teams in terms of what is permissible, what is acceptable, what types of use you're allowing, and what types of use you're discouraging, that's a right start in terms of a conversation of where you're headed. Because, as I said, I don't believe this wave will be stopped. So we can get on it and be part of the haves, or we can avoid it and look away and be part of the have-nots. And that gap is going to widen over the next couple of years. So with that, safe use, think about how you build, think about how you connect, think about how you protect, and have conversations with your teams about safe use of AI. Thank you very much.